Yesterday marked the 20th anniversary of the Twin Tower tragedy that took place on 9/11/2001. And for those of us who are old enough to remember, I think probably just about every one of us remembers where we were when that news came to us. I remember that I had just finished driving my bus route, and as I was headed back to the house, my sister called me and she said, "Dan, you have to turn on the TV." And I turned on the television, and the first plane had already crashed into the first building. And as I watched the events on television, I watched the second plane as it flew into the second building. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You know, there were people that, when that happened 20 years ago, who asked, "Where is God?" And, you know, it was a wake-up moment that caused America to stop and say, you know, maybe everything isn't what we've always assumed that it is. You know, as we come to the 20th anniversary of the Twin Towers, I'd like to be able to say that all of that is behind us and we won't ever have to worry about that again. But the honest reality is that today the Taliban is far better equipped than it ever was 20 years ago. And the potential, the possibility of another attack on American soil has probably never been greater than it is today. We have a southern border where people are coming through. We can't possibly know who is amongst the refugees that are coming through there. We have $83 billion worth of weapons that were intended for the Afghan army that have now been turned over to terrorists. If there is ever a time when, as a nation, we needed to look to our Creator for the answers that we desperately need, it's never been more than now. This morning, my message is adapted from a sermon Melvin Newland preached at Ridge Chapel in Kansas, Oklahoma. And if you would, turn with me to 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verses 19 through 22, where it says this: "But if you turn away," and God here is speaking to the Israelite people when, as Solomon has just finished building the temple. And he says, "But if you turn away and forsake the decrees and the commands that I have given you, and go off and serve other gods and worship them, then I will uproot Israel from my land, which I have given them, and will reject this temple that I have consecrated for my name. I will make it a byword and an object of ridicule among all peoples. And though this temple is now so imposing, all who pass by it will be appalled and say, 'Why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple?' People will answer, 'Because they have forsaken the Lord, the God of their fathers, who brought them out of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshiping and serving them. That is why he brought all this disaster upon them.'" Now, mind you, when God spoke these words, Solomon's temple was brand new. It was incredible. It was amazing. I mean, there was gold everywhere. And yet God said, if you turn your backs on me, there will be consequences. And it happened. In 586 BC, the temple that Solomon built was destroyed. And many of the Israelite people were carried into captivity into Babylon. That temple would later be rebuilt. And then Saul, King Saul, not King Saul, Herod the Great, would build the third and final temple. What I thought was interesting that I had never known before was that in order for before the Israelite people would allow Herod to build the third temple, in order for him to do that, he had to incorporate every single stone that was in the second temple into the temple that he built. And it was an amazing technological marvel of its day. Certainly not as fancy or ornate, didn't have as much gold in it as Solomon's temple did. But when Herod got ready to build the temple, what he envisioned wouldn't fit on Mount Moriah. And so what he did is he built a retaining wall around Mount Moriah and filled in that area with dirt so that it would hold what he wanted. Today, that retaining wall is all that remains of Herod's temple. We know it as the Wailing Wall. It is that area that Orthodox Jews go to and pray and stick their prayers in the cracks of that wall. And if you had X-ray vision and could see through that wall, you would actually see underneath the site where the temple was built. God warned Solomon and the people from day one that if they wanted his blessing, that they would have to remain in him. You know, there's a song that says, God bless America, land that I love. I'm convinced that God has blessed America. But the Bible teaches that to whom much is given, much is expected. And if that's so, then God must expect a lot from America. I'd like to look at America's past, its present, and its future. So let's look first at its past. History tells us that in 1620, a group of Christians who called themselves pilgrims made their way from England across the Atlantic Ocean to the shores of this land. They had received permission to settle in the northern part of the region known as Virginia to establish a colony and erect a church that they hoped would be free and independent of the Church of England. But late fall winds battered their boat, pushing them northward, and when they finally sighted land, it was at the place that we now call Cape Cod, Massachusetts. The date was November 21st. They didn't want to land there because it was a cold and a forbidding wilderness. So they debated for a while. Should we try to get to Virginia or just go ahead and settle here? Finally, they decided that their boat would probably not make it to Virginia, so they came ashore at a place that we now know as Plymouth Rock. But before they did, they wrote what is known today as the Mayflower Compact. It began with these words: "In the name of God, we whose names are underwritten have undertaken for the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith a voyage to plant a first colony in the northern part of Virginia, and do solemnly and mutually in the presence of God and one another a covenant and combine ourselves together." Do you realize what they were saying? They're saying, we have come in the name of God, we have come here to glorify God, and we have come here to advance the Christian faith. They were saying, we are unashamedly Christian, and we search for a place where we can worship God the way we feel the Bible tells us to worship Him. Someone has said the difference between North and South America is that the Spaniards went to the south in South America in search of gold, but the Pilgrims and the Puritans came to North America in search of God. There's enough truth in that to explain some of the differences in history and the development of our two continents. The earliest foundations of this new land were spiritual ones. We are a nation that is built upon faith and a commitment to God. What about our present? Think about America's present. Are you proud to be an American? I am. I still get chills when I sing the Star-Spangled Banner. I still get tears in my eyes when I say the Pledge of Allegiance. I love this country, and I'm proud to be an American. There are many things that you can do in this land that you can't do anywhere else in the world. There are many wonderful things about our country that we could mention this morning. But I'm concerned about America. Listen to this warning found in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verses 19 through 22. "But if you turn away and forsake the decrees and the commands that I have given you, and go off and serve other gods and worship them, then I will uproot Israel, I will uproot this nation from my land, which I have given them, and reject this temple I have consecrated for my name. I will make it a byword and an object of ridicule among all the peoples. And although this temple is now so imposing, all who pass by it will be appalled and say, 'Why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple?' People will answer, 'Because they have forsaken the Lord, the God of their fathers, who brought them out of Egypt, and who have embraced other gods, worshiping and serving them. That is why He brought all this disaster on them.'" And it happened. The Bible very clearly teaches that if we love God and obey Him, then He will bless us. But this passage teaches that if we forsake God, if we serve other gods and worship them, then God will remove His blessing. And that's what happened to Israel. And I'm afraid, I'm fearful, that that is what will happen to America as well. Some years ago, a New York elementary school teacher was fired from her job. It was not because she was immoral, not because she abused the children, not because she used vulgar language, but because when one of her students died tragically, grieving classmates asked the teacher, "What happens when you die?" She answered, "I think she's gone to heaven." But if you want to talk about this, I'll be glad to meet with you after school is over. 29 of the kids met with her and her teacher, or met with her after school. And she told them about her faith in God and his son Jesus. She told them she believed in heaven and that their classmate was with God now and happy for all eternity. Then she prayed with them. But one of the kids in her class, who had not stayed after school, was upset with what the teacher had done and went to the administrators. The teacher was fired immediately and told to clean out her desk. Before crying students, she cleaned out her desk and went out into the world of unemployment. Someone has said, it's ironic. They tell us about guns and the danger of guns. They pass out condoms and say, go home and have safe sex. But when we want to talk about the one who created us, that is a forbidden subject. We have slid a long ways down a slippery slope. And if we don't stop that slide, we'll lose all the blessings that God has given to us. If you're looking for someone to blame for the moral decline of this country, you need to realize that we started down this slippery slope not 10 or 15 years ago, but more than 50 years ago, when our government said that you can't pray in school. Some Christians protested, but many people just stood by silently accepting it. When we were told that we could no longer read the Bible or honor God in school, once again, the vast majority didn't say a word. When abortion was legalized and millions of babies were being aborted, instead of crying out about the murder of babies, the loudest voices were rejoicing over women's choice. And finally, the silent majority remained silent while the Supreme Court told us that the Constitution had this fundamental right that no justice ever saw before, that allows you to marry someone if you love them, regardless of their gender. We have been on this slippery slope for a long time, haven't we? America is a great country. We're the most materially blessed people in all of the world. In fact, if you're at the poverty level in this country, you are in the top 5% of the wealthiest people in the entire world. At the poverty level in America, you are still in the top 5% of the world's most wealthy people in the world. God has blessed America, and I love America. But the so-called silent great majority of Christians must remain silent no longer. I'm just going to say one more thing and then I'm going to move on here quickly. There's no secret where I fall in matters of abortion, same-sex marriage, my political leanings. Everybody that's here knows kind of where I'm at. And I'll say this. I feel like my own party betrayed me shortly after 9/11. Because we passed this bill known as the Patriot Act that was supposed to protect us and make us feel safer. But what it actually did is it allowed our own government to spy not just on terrorists, but on each and every one of its own citizens. And in that regard, I feel like as American citizens, we were betrayed. In the last 18 months, we have underwent a pandemic, something that I've never seen in my lifetime. We were told that everybody needed to stay home in order to flatten the curve, so that we wouldn't overwhelm our hospitals. And people did it. We were told to wear masks so that we wouldn't transmit COVID-19 to other people. And people did it. We were told to get this new vaccination that was granted experimental approval. And if we did, we could return back to life as normal. And people did it. Is life normal for people who have taken the vaccine? No. My concern in everything that we have seen is that we have willingly given up our freedoms for safety. And we have allowed our government this huge amount of control. But if we're not careful, we'll find that we have no control left. I'm not judging anybody on any decisions that they have made. All that I'm saying is that we need to be careful, or we'll end up like Australia, where they are giving them apps that they have to put on their phone, and they check in randomly 3 times a day, and if you're not at your house, they send the police to go find you. Is that really the society that we want to live in? I'm not saying that we shouldn't protect ourselves. But how much control is enough control before it becomes oppression? You see, the early Christians came to America to find freedom from the oppression of the Church of England, who told them how they could worship, and when they could worship, and what they could believe and what they couldn't believe. They came to America so that they could worship God as they saw fit. And my concern is, as a nation, where are we headed? Where are we headed in regard to our religious freedom? Where are we headed in regard to our political and our plain old freedom? I pray for America because I am concerned for her. Let me go quickly to America's future. What does God expect of us? Micah 6:8 tells us, and it says this: He has showed you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Those are 3 pretty good things, don't you think? So let's take note of them. First, act justly. First of all, he says that we're to act justly, which means to do what is right. God expects our country to do what is right, to do the right thing, even though the wrong thing is the easiest thing to do. It means to take care of the poor and the elderly, to minister to the sick and to the unborn, to protect them, to tell the truth. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of turning on the television and seeing all of the spin. We watched the President of our United States yell and shoot at people because they haven't gotten the vaccine. He said that, first of all, that the vaccine is safe and effective. And then he turned around and he said, but unvaccinated people are putting vaccinated people at risk. Well, if the vaccine is safe and effective, then how is it putting vaccinated people, how is unvaccinated people putting vaccinated people at risk? Either it's safe and effective or it isn't safe and effective. And I got done seeing that, and the question in my mind is, you know, the impression that I got was that he was blaming unvaccinated people for all of the problems that we're experiencing. Are they really the cause of all those problems, or are we just looking for somebody to put the blame on? We need to talk truthfully and honestly. I saw a poll that said 30% of the American people approve of the way that we withdrew from Afghanistan. And yet, what we saw on television was the media tell us that this was a fantastic, successful withdrawal. Even though there's hundreds of Americans that are still stranded and trapped in Afghanistan. What is wrong with saying, you know, maybe we could have done a better job at this, and we'll try to do better in the future? But that's not what we're hearing. And it's hard to trust when you don't feel like you're getting the truth. We need to do the right thing. Thomas Jefferson said, "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that justice cannot sleep forever." Secondly, love mercy. I've got to go quickly because I'm out of time here. Micah says we're to love mercy, and that means to extend mercy and forgiveness to others. We've received it ourselves. We all know that we're the recipients of God's mercy. We've been forgiven by Him. We didn't earn our salvation. God has saved us by His grace and by His mercy. Therefore, we are to share what we have received. So we give back to the community, to the world, the mercy and grace and forgiveness that God has given to us. In other words, we develop deep compassion for those who are lost. And then finally, to walk humbly with the Lord. Now, that may be the most difficult of all, because you see, our natural tendency is to be proud and arrogant and overconfident. You know, some years ago, I read about a worldwide survey of 13-year-old kids to discover that the nation that was best in mathematics. Do you know what the result was? The number one nation for 13-year-old kids in mathematics was South Korea. 13-year-old Korean kids were better in math than anybody else. Do you know where the United States placed? Dead last. But here's the interesting thing about the survey. After it was taken, the kids were asked, do you think that you're good at math? 23% of the Koreans who placed first said, yes, I think I'm good at math. 68% of the U.S. kids who placed dead last said, yes, I think I'm good at math. What does that tell you? God says that we need to walk humbly. The Bible says that God mocks the proud but gives grace to the humble. So America needs to change. And if she does, it will not just be because of what happens in the White House, but because of what has happened in your house and mine. That's what will bring about the change that's needed. Then we need to get back on track again and put God at the center of our churches, our homes, and our schools. Then America will change, and she'll become the country that God has always wanted her to be. Noel Enlow wrote the words and music to a very meaningful song. The lyrics to this song are this: in New York Harbor stands a lady with a torch raised to the sky, and all who see her know she stands for liberty for you and me. I'm so proud to be called an American, to be named with the brave and the free. I will honor our flag and our trust in God and the Statue of Liberty. Verse 2 says, on lonely Golgotha stood a cross, with my Lord raised to the sky, and all who kneel there live forever, as all the saved can testify. I'm so glad to be called a Christian, to be named with the ransomed and whole. As the statue liberates a citizen, so the cross liberates the soul. Oh, the cross is my statue of liberty. It was there that my soul was set free. Unashamed, I'll proclaim that a rugged cross is my statue of liberty. I love this country. I love the freedoms that we enjoy. But as Neil Enlow points out, there's a greater monument to freedom than the Statue of Liberty. It's the cross on which Jesus Christ died for your sins and mine. There we find real liberty because in Him we're set free from our sin. There's also a tomb. And the one who occupied it for a brief time is not unknown to us. But if you don't know Him, please let me introduce Him to you. He is the Prince of Peace, the Son of God, the foundation of our country, and our Savior. If you don't know Jesus, then we invite you to come as we sing our invitation hymn.